I am so lucky to be taking this midlife journey with some incredible women who I think of not only as friends, but actually as mentors. And one of those amazing women is Lynnis Woods Mullins. She is the founder of the V.I.B.E community that is vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and emerged. And I cannot wait to dive into all of that with you, Lynnis. Welcome to the new mid.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's wonderful to be here. Wonderful to chat with you. It's always fun. Whenever we get chatting, time just goes by so quickly. You are such a bright light in the world, and I really am honored to be here and share this space with you.
Well, Lynnis, you are an incredible woman, and not surprisingly, you come from incredible parents. So I was hoping before we dive into everything about V.I.B.E, which is amazing movement and growing incredibly, do you mind telling us a little bit about your parents?
Sure. My parents came from Georgia. My mom was born in Griffin, and my dad was born in Marietta, very, very small towns. And they both came from families where education was very important, which for African-American families back then, because we're talking now almost 100 years ago, because my mom would be 80, 88, my dad would be 89. And that was unusual. My father's father was a school principal, in fact, the first Black president of the school board in Marietta, and had a master's in math. And my other side, on my mother's side, her father had a master's as well, and both their mothers had BA degrees. So education was a big thing. My parents met as a result of education. My mom went to Spelman College. My dad went to Morehouse College, and Spelman is an all African-American women's college in Atlanta. And Morehouse is an all males African-American college in Atlanta. In fact, Morehouse is a school that Martin Luther King went to. My dad and Martin Luther King were college mates. Martin Luther King was like 2 classes ahead of my dad, but they were friends. Anyway, my mom met my dad because my mom's roommate was my dad's sister. And he met my mom, and they dated. And then my dad was a year ahead of my mom. He graduated and went to officer school in the Air Force. And my mom graduated and went back home to be a teacher, because back then there wasn't like a whole lot of choices for African-American women with degrees. Most of them went back and they taught school. So my mom was living with her mother and teaching. My dad on leave he was trained to be a navigator, came back to Griffin, asked my mom to marry him. They had a wedding there in Georgia, and they moved to California. And that's where I came along. It's kind of interesting because when they moved to California, my dad exited the military maybe about a year later, right before I was born. So when I was born, my dad had been in the military for 5 years, but he was gone from the military. My mom and dad got this little apartment, and my dad couldn't get a job anywhere else initially as a Black man in California. He was waiting tables at a very exclusive club that was all white. Okay, I don't think they were, they didn't prohibit Blacks, but there were just no Blacks that belonged to it. Anyway, one day he was serving one man's table who happened to be the governor of California. His name was Governor Brown, Jerry Brown's father. And he asked my dad, he said, you're not from here. Where are you from? And my dad didn't have a Southern accent. He still doesn't know to this day. Governor Brown told him later it's because the way he came across. And my dad was a very handsome man, very articulate, just a very kind spirit. And he told him, his story and everything else. He said, you know what? I can get you a job somewhere. And he said, here's my card. I want you to call tomorrow morning. Back then, you didn't have to go through all these different screening processes and everything. So bottom line is he ended up as an analyst with the California Highway Patrol. And through the years, he grew in his job. And then one day he gets a call, and this is like maybe about 25 years later, from Jerry Brown Jr., Governor Brown's son, asking him to be the director for the state of California for the Department of Welfare, which was called benefit payments back then or whatever. So my dad was a government or Brown appointee for 8 years. And during that time, when he first ran for president, the first time around, my dad went stomping with him and traveled all these wonderful places with Jerry Brown, and went to China, was on 60 Minutes, because he really created the first electronic food stamp program where they had a card and the card was loaded and all that. That was back in the 70s. So my dad had a fantastic and illustrious career, a lot of firsts. and my mother as well. So I had the benefit of parents who were not only well educated, but they were also civically minded. My
Yes.
father first started the first urban league in Sacramento. He also was president of the Civil Service Commission, which was responsible for integrating the fire department, the police department, and all that, and getting people of color and women into roles of management and authority. And so that's what I grew up with. And it was not a big deal for Daddy King to stay at our house.
I mean, that's
Because
okay. I have to say,
yes,
you just sort of glossed over that. Yeah, my dad was friends with Martin Luther King.
yes, he was. Yes, he was very good friends with them. You know what's funny about that? When I went to Spelman as well as my sisters went to Spelman. One of my daughters went to Spelman. It's a kind of a thing. My first husband, he went to Morehouse. Freshman orientation is always all female, but the first year back in 1975 or 76, they decided to have blended freshman orientation. So when I get there, I'm sitting, a couple of rows, and to the right of me was Ralph Abernathy's son, and to the next to me was another guy's son. I'll call his name in a minute when I get to it. It'll come to me. But anyway, behind me was Dr. King's son, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and I'm like, Marty. I said, you're here? He said, but it's not, where else would I be going to school? I could not go to school anywhere else but Morehouse. So I got a chance to go to school with Marty King. We were in the same class. We graduated together. He didn't get married until many years later, but when he did, I went to his wedding. A great guy, huge, huge shoes to fill, difficult to be the son of
Oh
Martin
yeah.
King. It's an
Oh,
ongoing quest. I mean, can you imagine?
I can't even imagine.
No, it's just really, it's just like living, he said, it's like living with a king, truly,
Right.
and that expectation. And of course, my father was not like that, but I do know what it feels like to be born of parents with high achievements and parents of note. And it is a sense of responsibility, especially as an African American female, and probably one of the reasons why I have the drive that I do. My parents never forced me to do anything. They didn't place a lot of expectations on me or anything like that. But somehow or other, I ended up at Spelman. It was so funny. I didn't even apply anywhere else. I just knew that's where I was going, but I wanted to go, and it was the best experience ever, ever, ever. It was really a humbling experience because in many cases, I was always the only Black this, the only
Right.
Black that in terms of where I went to school. When I
Right.
got to Spelman, there were a lot of Lynnis's there. It was kind of overwhelming. It's like, oh, they were all student body presidents and cheerleaders and straight A students and all this stuff, but going to school with the best of the best
Right.
really helped solidify my identity in terms of the importance of knowing that you're doing your personal best. And your personal best doesn't have to be perfect. And your personal best doesn't have to be someone else's benchmark. You set your own benchmarks. And I had to learn that because, these ladies were just like, woo, really.
Right.
Many of them are just like really very, very successful. My sister, who went to Spelman, she went to school with Shonda Rhimes. They were in the same
Oh
class.
wow.
That just gives you an idea of the quality of women that go there. But it really did set a course for me. I chose corporate America for 25 years. And as you know, I had an anxiety disorder and
Yes.
decided that I needed to do something else. And that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. It was as a result of trying to figure out how to get well without dropping any pharmaceuticals and without going crazy at the same time. I took a year off and,
Well,
decided
Lynnis,
after that year.
I think what's so amazing, there's so many incredible things that you just said, and you're just like kind of matter of fact about it. And that's what's so amazing about you is you're so humble. You are surrounded by greatness. And it is, your father was considered sort of the Martin Luther King of Sacramento. You had
Right.
told me
Yeah,
once.
absolutely. Every year around that time on his birthday, he was always on television up until his death. In fact, they still run a commercial that my dad does about the Martin Luther King Day because they have this big thing in Sacramento every year. They didn't have it last year because of the pandemic, but the year before that, they were still running the commercial after he had passed. And when he had his services, because Dad wasn't sick. He just passed. It was just time. We couldn't find a church that was available on that day that was large enough. And the interesting thing about it was, because a lot of his friends had passed on, people that he knew, it was all the young people who are younger than me that he was friends with. I'm 64, so I'm talking about people who are like in their 30s and 20s that he was mentoring, that came up and spoke, and who were part of that. I, asked to be part of the program that he had relationships with. And I think that's so important. I think it's all of our responsibilities, not just to mentor our peers, but to mentor those younger generations, because right now, with how crazy things are, I think that we can function as a voice of reason, because we grew up at a time where there was reason. Right now, it's really like, as we said before, before we started, it's like operating without a net. You don't know from one day to the next. I was telling a friend that, it used to be when CNN said, for instance, breaking news, it was, oh yeah, right, whatever. But now when they say breaking news, you stop to find out what's going on now, because it's like really breaking news. And that is, it's traumatic, it's stressful.
Yeah,
And
it's
so,
stressful. It really is. And it just feels like there's a lot of fear in the world right now. And what's so amazing is you have taken all of your life experiences and decided to give back. You help so many people. And the reason why I met you, and as I started this, you are a huge advocate for midlife women and have been, and you have this whole V.I.B.E movement. Can you tell me a little bit, like, how did that get started? And I'm so excited that you've done that. And I'm so excited to be on this journey with you.
Well, it's funny. I started my company 13 years ago, be 14 years in April. And I first started out teaching dance, and the name of my company actually is Praiseworks, although that has faded into the background, but that is the name of my company. And I was going to open up a dance studio and a wellness center. And I quickly found out after a few classes of dance that they needed so much more than just dance. And so I began to think of the programs that I would want to. And at that time, I was 51 when I started my company. So I began to think of programs that I would want to have, as a midlife person. And that's kind of where it all came from. And so I created this brand called Wellness Woman 40 and Beyond. And Wellness Woman was all about nutrition and fitness and, all about the things that we need to be well in our mind, body, and spirit. Holistic practices and spiritual renewal. But after about 5 or 6 years of the Wellness Woman, I wanted to make a change. I felt like there was something missing in the messaging. And so, one day when I was going on one of those walks that I go on, because I usually try to walk on the weekends, 20,000, 25,000 steps on the weekends, on a Saturday or whatever. And so I was on one of my long walks and I'm thinking, there's something else that I should be doing with this women. So I feel like women need to have their vibrations raised or something, in midlife, because so many women are feeling depressed or down or demotivated or just plain tired, So why don't we raise their vibe? And I thought, in fact, I recreate this on my website.
I love that.
Yeah,
And did you draw from, you had mentioned briefly before about your anxiety being in the corporate world and
yes,
all of the things you went through. So you had the experience of that.
yes, I did. I never really went through depression, but I did have anxiety. And I would wake up first thing in the morning and feel like I was going straight downhill on a roller coaster with no restraints, with my arms up. I mean, it was just like, awful. And that's when I first started drinking coffee, about 43 or 44, because that was the only thing that would trace that away, till eventually I had an event that made me realize that I needed to take some time off and get on top of this. There was not enough coffee in the world. And then that's when I was diagnosed with the anxiety disorder. But interestingly enough, actually, at that time I was in menopause. Menopausal females have something many times called menopausal anxiety. And the doctors don't always talk about that, but it's strictly driven by hormones, not necessarily by what's going on around you. Not necessarily emotionally. For me, it was definitely, that was a part of it, menopausal anxiety. But the other part had to do with post-traumatic stress. And that was definitely on how I found out about my mother's death. My mother died young. She was only 56. and she was in her car on her way to work, and she was hit by a fire truck. She had the green, they had the red, they didn't have on the siren, they were responding to a smoke alarm, and they just rammed right through her. I had just had a baby. She was 5 weeks old, and I was at my place of employment showing off the baby. This is before cell phones, 1989. I don't even know how I think my dad knew I was going to my office. So he called there and he told me, Mom's been in an accident. Why don't you go home, to his house and wait there? Because his father was visiting at the time. So I went home to be with granddaddy. And, we're waiting for the call, and this before cell phones, and I had left my organizer at work, rushing home. And I called my mom's office because I knew she had all my friends' numbers in her Rolodex. I couldn't remember any numbers. And back then you used to know numbers. I couldn't remember any numbers because I was so worried. I was feeling something, And so I call her, and Lucille picks up the phone, and I said, you know what, Lucille, I need to get so-and-so's telephone number. I just can't remember it right now. She says, oh, Lynnis, I can understand how you must be feeling. We are so sorry. We are so broken up. She said, we loved your mother. And I was like, loved? And I said, you mean she's gone? And that's how I found out that my mom didn't make it. At the last I heard, she was in ED and they were working on her. And so that's how I found out. And from that moment on, subconsciously is when I began to control the outcome. No matter what, I was going to be in control. I was going to control everything. And I did that for 25 years or more, 20 years, about 20 years, till finally I hit the wall.
Right.
I woke up and I couldn't stop crying.
Right.
My children never see me like that. My husband was concerned. We went to ED, and that's when the doctor said, it's like a little intervention, because it was kind of embarrassing. It was at the hospital where my offices were. I was director of recruitment for nursing for Northern California. And my office was based there, which is right down the street from my house. And, the hospital administrator came in, and, the head of ED, and these were my peers, people that, I worked with. And they're like, Lynnis, we're concerned about you. We think you should take some time off because, this is not like you,
Right.
So I did. I ended up making arrangements for a sabbatical for 1 year because, in healthcare, you can do sabbaticals. And I went back and I thought, well, I'll take some classes, go back to school. And what I ended up going back to school for, though, was not human resources. I was deciding, all kinds of wellness courses and got certified in certain things and all that. And when it came time for me to go back, I called my boss, and to this day, he still talks bad about me. And I said, you know what? I'm not coming back. I'm going to do something else and pack up my stuff. I don't even want to come back at all. He couldn't believe it because they held my position for a year.
Right.
I just knew it was time for me to move on to something else. I had hired back then they called them consultants or analysts. Now they call them coaches. But I'd hired a marketing consultant to help me put together a framework of what it was I wanted to do, and hung out my shingle, so to speak, and started Praiseworks.
And the thing that's so amazing about that is that you've helped so many women because of what you've been through, and you could understand that. And so listening to your gut and listening to your heart and realizing, you know what, I've gone through this. I'm sure there are other midlife women who are going through this. So I'm going to take what's happened to me so that it doesn't happen to other women, or if it is happening to them, help them find, a wellness and health and happiness. And what I love so much, you are such an example of what you coach and what you tell people, because here you are. And I love that you admit your age. You're like, I'm 64. You have no problem admitting that.
Yeah.
But you've just had two amazing things happen, and you call them on your bucket list. The first, you were signed with a modeling agency. Yeah. Celebrating Gray. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
And then you're also in a play, but I'd love to. So here we are, I love how you're like, never stop growing, never stop learning.
Mhm.
What is this all happening, Lynnis? This is incredible.
I think there something energetically that's going on. As entrepreneurs, you've got peaks and valleys all the time. You hit this plateau and everything's kind of like flat. Then all of a sudden it's like, whoa. And so I've learned that when the woo comes, to just grab it. The timing may not be perfect, but just grab it. And these opportunities all just happen to have come at the same time. And and I just decided just to grab it. I believe not in only seizing the opportunity, but to go ahead and grab it, even if you don't know exactly how it's going to all work out. I'm a Christian. I believe that if God brings you to it, he'll bring you through it. And that has really been the mainstay of my last 15 years and on this journey that I've been in to get well and then to put together my company. So I think that energetically, it was just my time. So I'm going to ride the wave for as long as I can. I've learned that if you try to force things, that doesn't work. And you definitely have to allow. You have to kind of let go. You do what you can as an entrepreneur and you just let go and you move on to something else. Maybe that seed that you planted may not sprout too much later. Now, with the play, that seed was planted maybe about 4 or 5 years ago when I was talking to one of my best friends who is a SAG card holder. She's a professional actress and a director. And I said, one day I think I'd like to do some community theater, just, happenstance. Then I get this call 3 weeks ago and she's like, Lynnis, would you like to do a walk-on part? I remember what you said. And, I was like, yeah, walk-on, not a problem. She said, okay, so show up on a Zoom interview. And I did. And the next thing I know, they're like, Lynnis, we were thinking like, we'd like to give you a part where you're speaking. And I was like, okay. So when I got the part, I'm like, wait a minute, this is like a major role. Like, yeah,
Now
but you
you
can
have
do
to
it.
learn lines. Now you have to
Right?
memorize lines.
Yeah, 15 pages of dialogue. Yeah. And when I really get it down, so because last time I was in a play where I spoke was in 1976 in college. I've been on the stage many, many times because I'm a dancer. So I've danced many times. So I have nothing to do with stage fright. That's fine. But remembering these lines, I have to like do it just the way in remembering dance moves. After a while, the part just takes over, and before you know it, you're off stage. And that's what I'm working on now. And as I'm talking to you, I'm remembering, yes, it's sometimes you just saturate yourself with the part, with the role, and then all of a sudden it just comes. So that's what I'm believing in God for this, that it'll just come and I'll just.
Well, you work really hard too, though, at everything that you do. And so this did start from wellness, from health. So for us midlife women, what would you say your top suggestions, your top tips would be for us to really concentrate on our health in midlife?
Well, my acronym for VIBE means to be vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and emerged. So when it comes to vibrancy, vibrancy is not just the way you look. It's a way of living. It's an energy of being passionate about what you're doing and pursuing those things that you're really excited about, and not just settling for just living a life that's ho-hum and giving up that it's too late for you to do that. So in order to have that passion, you want to make sure you're taking good care of yourself. Self-care is hugely important. So making sure that you get enough hydration, making sure, speaking of that, making sure that you get enough rest and sleep, making sure that you have a diet that works for your body. I am not a purist. I happen not to eat a lot of meat. I'm basically lacto-ovo vegetarian, but whatever works for you, know what works for you, learn to listen to your body. And then once you get the knowledge, whether you hire a coach or you do the research yourself or you talk with your doctor, whatever it is, once you get the knowledge is that's a lot of power in knowledge, but acting on that knowledge is powerful. So once you
Right.
get the knowledge, act on it. And that
Right.
can all lend towards your vibrancy. And
Well,
the other
yeah.
thing is, learning to listen to that inner voice, really
Mm,
working on enhancing your intuition. That's the second letter of vibe. And one way to do that is to allow yourself to get quiet. I believe in meditation. And I have this thing called 3x3, where you do 3 minutes a day, 3 times a day, if you're just getting started in meditation. Because I hear a lot of women say, well, I have all these running thoughts and, I don't have time to calm down and everything else, but you make it a priority, put it on your to-do list, just like you do everything else, make it a priority. And the reason why this is so important is it gives your body an opportunity for a little mini shutdown. It gives you an opportunity for the cortisol levels to go down and for you to get more acquainted with the idea of silence. Because within that silence, what will rise is the voice that you need to be hearing that you're not hearing when you're rushing around doing errands and helping everybody else and playing all the different roles that you play. But giving yourself that quiet time is hugely important. And the other thing has to do with your inner beauty. The acronym for V.I.B.E, for B, is beauty. But when I'm talking about beauty, I'm really talking about inner beauty that radiates out. I can tell you that because I've done a lot of that inner work, peeling back the layers to get to the bottom of my anxiety, dealing with some of my traumas that I just hadn't dealt with, that I pushed into my emotional closet until finally they all came tumbling out. By dealing with that, I look different. I look at myself now when I was in my 40s and look at myself now. And there's a light that's there in my eyes that wasn't there back then.
Yes. And
Yeah,
what's so interesting about that is you can really tell like someone who's a good person and how they age. And this
it's
isn't
so
a slam
true.
on anybody, but I have to tell you, like, have you noticed how bad Mel Gibson has aged? I mean, it's a fact.
Yes,
Your real insides come
yes,
to
it
light. They
comes out.
show who
Yes.
you really are. And you are vibrant. You look amazing. I mean, look at you. You have a modeling agent at 64. That's
No, that's so
awesome.
crazy. That is so crazy.
Which
That's,
kind of leads into emerged, right? I
yes,
mean, that's
exactly.
so what that is all about.
The last part for the V.I.B.E acronym is E, for emergence. And emergence basically is all about allowing the sum total of who you are to emerge into that total woman that you want to be or really already are. I think we have two kinds of people in this world. You have the wounded and you have the walking wounded. And the walking wounded are people who have either wittingly or unwittingly decided they're just not going to do the work. They're just
Right.
going to live life the way it is. They're
Mhm.
not going to peel back the layers. They're not going to deal with their depression. They're not going to deal with their obesity. They're not going to deal with their poor relationships. They're not going to deal with their lack of self-love. They're just not going to deal with it. They're
Yeah.
just going to, put layer over layer of other stuff so they don't deal with
Well,
it.
that's when they start eating a little bit more, or they'll start drinking, or they all have all these numbing.
That's right.
Um,
That's
and
right.
it's still there. It's always gonna show up and emerge.
It's right. It's
So
always going to show up. And then you have those who have decided to do something about it. They're no longer part of the walking wounded. They've decided that they're going to peel back the layers and get to the bottom of whatever it is that's causing them to do things that aren't serving them. And when you begin to do that, that's when the emergence is, because you're the sum total of all your experiences, your bad experiences and your good experiences. And I really wouldn't, I wish I could come up with another word than bad experiences. I think the
learning experiences.
learning
They're all
experiences,
learning. Yes.
fine-tuning experiences,
Yes.
fine-tuning experiences, because they prepare you for what is going to be ahead. And I think that as we begin to recognize as midlife women that you have true value, your wisdom and your life experience is valuable, and you need to recognize yourself for that and allow yourself to emerge, allow yourself to do the work that you've always wanted to do when it comes to whatever it is that you've wanted to pursue for yourself. I think sometimes women, because of the messaging that we get a lot in society, thinking that, after 50, after 60, after
Right.
70,
Mhm.
I just saw a picture of Helen Mirren, and she was at Fashion Week in Paris. And girl, you should see that picture.
Oh yeah.
She is rocking this pantsuit, and she's got the platform heels on. And her hair is that gray with the spiky. She's got a little bit exaggerated eyeliner on or whatever, but she looks fabulous. And
Yes.
it's her energy. And I think, what is she, 70 something? I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh
that's
yeah.
amazing. Just
It's
amazing.
so you know what I love this so much, and I'm so glad we're talking about this. And we have those role models, but when we get down to basics, the basic woman who is listening to this right now, and she's like, okay, Lynnis is inspiring me, but I'm just not able to get started. Like I'm just What is that, Lynnis? How can you light a
Well, I
fire
think
under somebody?
sometimes what's happening a lot, especially right now with this whole midlife movement, because it is a movement, it's happening in this country. It's not just me. I mean, I feel like I was a groundbreaker when I first started because no one was online like this. Definitely not my demographic. I quickly found that out when I wasn't making any money. No one was online like that. Mind, body, spirit was really kind of new and everything. So I think sometimes it can be overwhelming. It's so much. So you want to do things in increments. Take one thing at a time. If you want to, what I would do first, if you know there's several things you want to do, I would just data dump. I would put it all out in a spiral notebook or a journal or whatever, get it all out. And then take a look at it and begin to prioritize in terms of what your A1, your B1, and just figure out what's the most important thing. And then decide on what that one thing is that you want to change. It could be something as much as, I know I don't drink enough water. I know I
Yeah,
don't, which
right.
is very common because as we age, that part of our brain that normally tells us you're thirsty
Yes,
doesn't operate the same way,
that's right.
but we really are thirsty. And that thirst it presents itself in brain fog or tiredness or craving for something when you just got through eating an hour ago. That's all signs that you need to drink water. So, that could be one of your things. Instead of only drinking like 3 glasses of water a day, I'm going to set aside on my desk these 33-ounce bottles, and I'm going to get 3 of them. And by the end of the day, I'm going to
Yeah,
have drank all 3 of those bottles. I
I
mean,
love
that
that.
right there, you'll begin to detoxify. You'll have more energy. Your brain fog will be a little bit better. You might even lose weight as a result of drinking more water. And you'll just feel better. And that's just one little tweak. So begin to take a look at those small little tweaks that you can do. But it
Sure.
first starts out by just data dumping and pouring out everything that you want to do, and then beginning to decide to take one thing at a time. And before you know it, a year or two later, you are transforming into and pursuing those things that you've always wanted to do because you first started with that one little step.
Well, I love that because I'm a huge believer in writing down things. Pen to paper is so powerful. And you can just buy an inexpensive spiral notebook
Mhm.
and like you said, do just a brain dump. And writing is so cathartic. And you'll never know sometimes if you just let yourself go, what will come out. And then
Exactly.
have you ever done that and you look back and you're kind of like, wow, that was really profound?
Yeah, I have maybe about 30 journals that I've done in the last or maybe probably even more than that since I've been in this business. And one day my daughters will come across and like, whoa, all these things she was thinking about. But yeah, I think looking back and reflecting from whence you came is a very important part of your process because I just did a thing on Clubhouse yesterday about yeah, celebrating our wins, no matter how small they are. And it was amazing how many women showed up for that room because sometimes, especially as entrepreneurs, when you have a success, or even as a midlife person, when you have a success, you feel like, yeah, it's big to you, but it's small to someone else. But because it is big to you, it doesn't matter if it's small to someone else. You still need to celebrate that because you want to keep that energy going. You want to recognize when you've hit milestones. You want to recognize when you've achieved something you've been working on. You want to recognize when you're excited about the fact that you got a call back about something or that you finished a project or whatever it is. We just don't want to gloss over those things just because no one else may understand it. You understand it. So whenever you have a win, you want to do something special for yourself, whatever that is, whatever small thing, sometimes for me, it, might be buying a new pair of shoes or an outfit, but I also don't necessarily want to get into something monetary because many of us these days just don't have it like that. So maybe you run yourself a bath water and put special scents in it and
Yeah.
tell everybody, unless they're bleeding from an open orifice, do not come through this door.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Just
it's
acknowledging that is so powerful.
it is. It's very important.
Lynnis, this has been incredible as always. I love my time with you, and I know my community is going to as well. So, how can they get in touch with you? How can they find you?
The best way to get in touch with me is to follow me on Instagram and then click on the link in my profile, and that will lead you to the different programs that I have, the different social media that I have. I do want to say to invite everyone who's listening to the V.I.B.E Wellness Woman 40 and Beyond group on Facebook. We just made 10,000. I'm looking at it now. We're
Yes,
at 10,100.
congratulations.
We're at
Yay,
10,100.
congratulations. Talk
Yeah,
about celebrating.
yeah,
Yay.
yay! And we have women from, I used to say 90 countries, 92 different countries who are encouraging each other, posting information about wellness. And basically, they have decided that they want to be involved and show up in their wellness, show up in their life to be well. It's just for women, although we do have some men sneaking in there because the algorithm on Facebook changed, so they're kind of sneaking in there. But it's about 90% or more of women who have
Wow.
decided that they want to make some changes in their lives.
You are doing amazing. And I can't thank you enough, my friend, for coming on the New Mid podcast and shining your light with us and sharing your vibe.
It's wonderful being here, Michelle, and I'm so excited. I think you said this was close to you've done 100 episodes, so congratulations. I don't know when this airs, but still, that shows definitely a level of commitment. It isn't funny. It also shows how quickly time passes when you're being productive and pursuing your passions and doing things that you really enjoy. You don't even think about it. Then you look back and like, oh my gosh, 100 episodes, just like that. So
That is
congratulations
true. Well,
and
thank you
celebrate
so
that.
much. Yes, thank you. Well, Lynnis, you are such a treasure. And thank you for shining your light for all of us.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been wonderful being here. Thank you.